I'll share a few definitions of trauma that I like. And everything you said to me is true, first of all. Everything everybody said here is true. And I know trauma is seen as a big word, so that usually we look at as, and maybe a lot of you understand that it's not that way, but usually we look at as like growing up with like a dysfunctional home, sexual abuse, physical abuse, war, some kind of life-threatening event. These are the things we think of when we think of trauma. But I'm gonna use a much more broad definition of it and kind of normalize the term to see it's something that we all experience to varying degrees. And, even the people who grew up in the so-called most comfortable homes have impacts on and have been impacted from. And so I liked everybody's definitions, and I'm going to share two that I like and one that how I look at it today. And one that I like is related to what Tim said, and I think Gabor Mate really is the one that shares it that way, is that trauma is not what happens to you, it's what happens inside you as a result of what happens to you. So trauma is not what happened to me, some historical event. It's what happened inside me and my emotions and my nervous system, how that changed my behavior, how that impacted my worldview. And he has a more longer definition of it that I really love, which is trauma is any event that impacts and limits our response flexibility. And what that is, response flexibility, basically, is our ability to respond in many different ways to events in our lives. So probably if I go to you and I ask you, a very routine question, like you want to go to the beach or you want to go drink tea, or what do you want to do? Whatever you want. Probably, and by the way, if not, some of us could have difficulties with choices, but probably you don't feel a lot of anxiety about that. And you kind of see, oh, I have options. I can choose to do this. I can choose to do that. Maybe if you're messaging a close friend and it's just a casual message, then you're thinking of many options on how to message that person. So this is response flexibility. Hi, Julia. Response flexibility is I have options. I see options. It's like I'm driving a car. I could turn left. I could turn right. I could do whatever I want. That's response flexibility. And trauma, when we have trauma and you say trauma is an event that after that, it limits our response flexibility. That means that after a traumatic event, any event that reminds me of a trauma event that I experienced, I'm now going to basically respond in one very particular, predictable way. And I think we all know ourselves in places in our lives where we behave in predictable ways. We're like, that's the same, like this happens and for sure I'm going to experience anxiety, or this happens for sure I'm going to get angry. And I think we all know people that we can kind of know how they're going to behave about something because they do the same thing. You tell them that thing and they get it, they're going to get angry or scared or feel really bad about themselves. So that's a trauma response. That's that lack of response flexibility where our mind goes to the same thing or maybe the same two things sometimes. And trauma is any event that limits that, I think, is a much broader way to understand what it is. Because we've all had events in our lives, probably multiple, that limited the way we perceive the world, limited our ways of thinking in different ways, feeling in different ways, responding in different ways, behaving in different ways. So maybe somebody judged me when I was singing in third grade, and now my response flexibility got limited and I am afraid to sing. So now on, I'm going to not sing because I'm scared, right? That's a simple example. And many effects in the reduction of our response flexibility is we have a hard time being present, generally. We have a hard time seeing different points of view about things. So it's only the way we're conditioned to think. So if I was judged a lot or shamed a lot, then I'm only going to see things as I'm being bad and there's something wrong with me in situations. And it's going to be hard for me to think that maybe it's not that black or white. Because my way of thinking got kind of narrowed down by this traumatic event. My way of feeling got narrowed down. Okay. So that's one way to look at it, is it's a reduction of our response flexibility in life, our freedom. And I think another definition I like, which is a lot more vague actually, that's why I like this one, is that it disconnects us from ourselves. So these are events in our lives that we got more disconnected after. You know, we're less in contact with our body, less in contact with our emotions, with who we truly are. We act from pleasing or fear or anger, and we lose ourselves. Is that disconnection? That's Peter Levine. So hopefully you see by this definition that trauma could be many events in our life. It's not this, doesn't have to be this really big event like the big T trauma, as they call them, but it's that as well, you know. But it's any event that really limited us, that we became limited from. And there's a difference between a painful event and an event that caused trauma in us, in our system. If I go through something painful, and then let's say a month later or a bit later, 2 weeks, I am a new person from that experience. I actually grew. My worldview has expanded from this painful experience. Then this is not a traumatic event. This is a painful experience that I went through, but I actually grew from it. So that's actually the natural evolution of any life form, is we go through experiences, and some expanding, some painful, some feel good, and we grow. But in trauma, I went through an experience and I shrunk, I contracted, you know. I am actually less than who I was before in a way. I'm less expressive, I'm less myself. I'm less free, I'm less happy. My worldview is much more limited. That's what trauma does. So it limits that natural growth of any being. And it doesn't have to be that way, because of course we can heal trauma, and then actually that's what's called post-traumatic growth. We're actually, now we grow from that trauma, and we actually evolve thanks to it. So we bring things back to their natural order. So the way that I like to think of trauma personally is simply, it's any energy that got stuck in our body. That's how I like to think of it. Any energy that got stuck in our body. So we go through an experience that creates energy. Maybe there's outside energy coming in. There's inside energy created as a response to the experience. But something got stuck, and that energy is stuck inside me. Maybe I couldn't handle it. Maybe there was anxiety as a child and I couldn't handle it. So I put it in a box inside my body. And what happens is the energy becomes circular. It gets stuck and it just moves in circles in our body. And this is why we keep having the same thoughts over and over again, repeating the same patterns. It's just going in a circle. And then the healing, the unlocking of trauma, the post-traumatic growth, is the energy again is moving and it's flowing. And that's the healing. So any energy that's stuck in our body is, to me, I would say, a result of some trauma. And trauma has different aspects. Some is from our personal experience. Some is ancestral, cross-generational, where something that my parents and ancestors have went through, and I'm a direct line of them, so I carry now. And there's a collective trauma. If you do Gary's work, he likes to speak about, there he is, by the way, it's late as usual, joking. But if you do Gary's work, you know about the beliefs in society that we acquire. that limit us. That's kind of a collective trauma. You know, I think most of us in a Western society that has our beliefs, they grow up somewhere religious or different backgrounds, they'll have their own beliefs. That's a collective form of trauma. And that all gets stuck inside our system. So, any questions so far? Anything showing up? No? Okay. So, if we understand this way of understanding trauma, then we can understand that actually any trigger that shows up in our lives, from the point of view, we can see as a trauma response. It's something, Norm raises his hand. Okay, one moment, Norm. It's something that is an energy that's been stuck in our body, and it wants to come up. And it's not about the present moment. In that moment when it shows up, you know, when I get angry about something that's not a direct threat to my boundaries or real threat, this is a response of an energy stuck in me. And my mind thinks it's the same as what happened to me in the past. And that energy that's been stuck in my body wants to come out because I haven't processed it.